Okay, B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach. We're starting the third chapter of Shir HaShirim. So, as an introduction, as an introduction to the third perek, the Malbim puts in perspective, based on the first three words of the perek, where Shlomo holds in his life and what he will come to share with us in which part of the episode of his life he's going to share with us. Now we addressed that Shir HaShirim is the different spiritual heights Shlomo HaMelech had in his life, right? So we spoke about two. Now we're entering the third one. This one will start from the third perek all the way until the fifth perek, pasuk bet. Okay? Ani yeshena v'li bi'er. Until the pasuk, Ani yeshena v'li bi'er. So we have two prakim and two psukim, and one pasuk to be exact, that will discuss one period of Shlomo HaMelech's prophecy. By far, it will be in Shlomo HaMelech's life the most vivid and vibrant experience of Nevuah. We are at a time where he has been disconnected spiritually from the prophecy for a while. He built the Bet HaMikdash. We are at year 11 of his Malchut. And 14 days into consistent prayers and sacrifices to beg Hashem to reveal himself in the Bet HaMikdash and approve by his Shekhinah that the build-up of the Bet HaMikdash from Shlomo HaMelech is accepted. So it's a very, very intense period for Shlomo HaMelech.
Wow.
And a pivotal moment in his life, because it's the time where we will know, Shlomo HaMelech will know if all his efforts are accepted or not. And this is in parallel to what we know, the 8 days that it took Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan and take it down, build it and take it down until HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually resided his Shekhinah into the Mishkan. So this is, if you will, the same thing. So the Bet HaMikdash is now built, operational, but we don't see the Shekhinah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the site. 14 days. Now, the Malbim tells us that there is something very particular about this third prophecy. It's really the second full blast prophecy of Shlomo HaMelech, but only the second as a real prophecy, because we know that the second encounter was more Ruach HaKodesh and a mix of the body's emotions and senses and the neshama, right? That was the one we just learned in the second perek. Now, the third encounter, spiritual encounter, says the Malbim, comes, like we said, and the Gaon agrees, after a time of darkness, after a time of complete disconnect. And this is why it says, Al Mishkavi Balelot, a long nights, a lot of nights. Night represents the Chosher, the darkness, a long time of disconnect, okay? There is a new element brought to the creation that is called the Bet HaMikdash. Okay? And this is what El Bet Imi, El Cheder Orati, we're going to go and see throughout the Prakim, the reference to the Bet HaMikdash. But says the Malbim, the Bet HaMikdash will be an addition that will allow Shlomo HaMelech to keep as default a level of connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a prophetic level that never happened before. Until now, you had an experience and a fallout, an experience and a fallout. Through the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beit HaMikdash, there has been now a new parameter, okay, that is now integrated into that new formula that allows prophecy or a spiritual level to be kept, even after the influence of the Gviyah, after the influence of the Benot Yerushalayim, which we know represents the influence of the body, right? The Gaon brings a new perspective also to the dimension of the darkness that Shlomo HaMelech went through. Okay? The period of time it took before Shlomo HaMelech work is accepted by Hashem. And he compares that to the 80 days that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be able to bring down the second Luchot HaBerit. We know that he prayed 40 days for the Teshuvah of Am Yisrael after the sin of the Chet HaEgel, the golden cow. Then he went up another 40 days to be able to be allowed, right, to have second Luchot HaBerit, 10 Commandments. And only after 80 days, Moshe Rabbeinu is granted the new Luchot HaBerit. Says the Gaon Mivilna, this is the same comparable period for Shlomo HaMelech. Al mishkavi, on my bed, balelot, during the nights. He says nights, it's in plural, meaning long nights, many nights. Mishkavi, on my bed, with bikashti et she'ahava nafshi. I was craving for my beloved one. Bikashti, I was asking for it. I was looking for it. I was begging for it. Velo metzativ, and I wasn't able to find it. Oh. And we will see, says the Gaon, that 5 times Shlomo HaMelech states the desire of quest, the bikashti, the desire to want something, to look for it. The bakasha, we address it many times in the past. When you look for something, you are putting your whole essence in order to find something that will fill you up or empower you to get to another level, right? You don't look for something for the sake of looking, okay? You need to look for something. You need to want it. If you want something, is in order to become one with that thing. If you don't want it, so you can have it, but it doesn't become one with you. When you want something, when you're mevakesh, when you ask for something, the bikush. If there is a bikush, it's because you want to fuse with something in order to elevate yourself and to benefit from that fusion. Says the Shlomo HaMelech, says the Gaon Milina, that 5 times we're going to see that Shlomo HaMelech requests, is mevakesh something. In the first pasuk, twice he's mevakesh, right? Al mishkavi balelot bikashti. On my bed, I was alone all this night, and I asked for my beloved one. Bikashti, number 2, velo metzativ, and I didn't find it. So it says the Gaon, he puts in perspective. He says we're talking about a period of time where the 5 spiritual layers that builds a human have been voided from the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know we have the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama, haya, yehida, right? We have the nefesh, which is Hashem's will for physicality to exist. We have the ruach, which is the emotional, spiritual influx that allows humans and creation to have emotions. We have the neshama, which is the soul. Haya is the spiritual connection that connects us to the yehida, which is the original point of will that Hashem created us as a neshama. So all of them are vehicles to allow us to embrace Hashem's presence on different levels. And what is the avodah, the work a man has to do, is to build himself in order to be able, and when you say man or woman, it's wrong, yeah, to build yourself to a level where you have an open channel of those 5 layers in order to be able to have an influx of Hashem's will into your physical, practical life, and through your practical actions, elevate your existence, your surrounding, and through your impact, okay, to a spiritual level, all the way to its makor, to its root, which is, by the way, the secret of the Magen David. I don't know, did we ever discuss it? Okay, so the Magen David, if you look at, we know how the Magen David look like, right? You have like this, a triangle like this, and then you have a triangle like this, right? Sorry, okay, all right. So what does that represent? The Magen David, we know, was one of the 2 signs that were on the David Melech's shield, army shields. The soldiers, when they on the shield, they had the menorah, okay, the lamnat seach, says the Zohar, and they had the Magen David. The Magen David. Why? What does the Magen David represent? The Magen represents the perfect harmony between spirit, God and man and God. How is that? If you look at the Magen David, we start from a point going down, right? That it represents Hashem, one point, showering and blessing the world, right? Okay, so it goes from one point going very large, right? And you might think that it stopped there, right? And man just received. It's not true. If you look at the bottom, you also have another point, okay, which is man, and that man impacts the entire creation, right? So the Magen David basically is a coexistence of Hashem's blessing and influence on the world, and man's impact also on the world. And that ideology and that reflection and awareness was a tremendous source of beracha and protection to the soldiers when they used to go to war. That one man can make a huge difference, and they should do that no matter where you are, you're always protected from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the sword of the Magen David. Okay, going back to the Gaon Mivina. So says the Gaon Mivina, 5 times in the Perek we will find Shlomo HaMelech requesting, begging, wanting the connection with his beloved, right? However, we know that in the beginning we don't have it. It's a moment of void. He says a moment of void, and this represents what? It represents the 5 layers of the spiritual build-up of an individual. And he says, what was the void? He says the 5 voids were the Anane Kavod. We know that the Anane Kavod represents the protection, right, of Am Yisrael. It was the layer of protection that kind of encapsulated and isolated Am Yisrael in the desert and protecting them from the outside world, which represents the nefesh. Okay, that's number 1. Then after that, actually, we have the Anane Kavod. Then after that, we have the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the Ruach. The Shekhinah is the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and which basically makes a person, an individual, recognize and feel comfortable that Hashem is with him. This is the Shekhinah. The third aspect to the Neshama is the Torah Kedosha. The Torah is the Emet, represents the Emet. We know that the Neshama is the Da'at, which is the ability to differentiate between the truth and the false, the Emet. And through your Neshama, you connect to the Torah, right? Which is the third level. Then we have Haya. Haya is we said is the connection with the Yehida, right? The spiritual connection to the Yehida, which is the point of origin. So the Haya is the Luchot HaBerit, the actual Luchot HaBerit, that are the point of connection between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem reveals himself, and how does he connect to us? Through the Luchot HaBerit, right? That's the point of connection between him and Am Yisrael. And the fifth one is the Ruach HaKodesh, is Hashem's presence inside a person, which is the Yehidah, Hashem's origin that resides inside each and every individual. Says the Gaon Mivilna, we are talking about a time in Shlomo HaMelech where there was a void, spiritual void on all five. So it's really the Leilot, it's really the darkness of nights. A point of time where Shlomo HaMelech, Kivyachol, right, is experiencing, begging Hashem for his presence, just like Moshe Rabbeinu is begging Hashem for his mercy, for a new point of connection, for a new Luchot HaBerit. Good? Good? Very good. Now, to bring that dimension on a more personal level, the Malbim comes and explains. And he says the following. He says, Shlomo HaMelech is after, like we said, after a period of very hard work and dedication to build the Bet HaMikdash. Okay? And he is, like he said, 14 nights begging for Hashem to come and reveal himself. You can imagine, you build the Bet HaMikdash for so long, you put all your efforts, all these resources, you're the king, everybody's looking at you, okay? You're the point of, of focus, and you would like Hashem to show a sign, yeah, and nothing. So those 14 days are not just 14 days. Huh? It's much more than 14. Huh? Now, what's very interesting is that 14 represent the 14 phalanges of the Yad. Yeah, Yad is the hand in Hebrew, and Yad is also Gematria 14, right? Yud is 10, Dalet is 14. On a practical level, why is the Yad called, the hand called Yad? Because you have 14 phalanges, right? You have 3, right? Times 4 is 12, 13, 14, right? So that's why it's called Yad. Yeah. Now, on a deeper level, if you take the word Yad and you write it b'milui, okay, meaning the Yud Vav Dalet, right? And the Dalet is Dalet Lamed Tav, right? We're good? It's Gematria Hotam. Hotam, it's a seal. Okay? Hotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emet. Right? This is why the seals at the time, anyways, when you had seals was in the beginning, it was the fingerprints, and then it was a ring that you wear on your hand, right? The chotam, the seal of approval, came after 14 days, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically took his hand and blessed the makom of the Bet HaMikdash. So says the Malbim, here we are also in an element, if we put things in perspective, of full blast influence of the animalistic, emotional, and imaginative forces of Shlomo HaMelech, of men. Okay, and that's quite obvious, right? Because if we are in we're in darkness.
Positive or negative emotions, or
so what are we saying? We're talking about darkness right now, right?
Okay.
Al mishkavi bal lelot. So if it's darkness, it doesn't have to be bad. but it's definitely not spiritual.
Okay.
Nachon? But so and now the Malbim brings an introduction, okay, in the second pasuk, in order for us to understand the build-up of Shlomo HaMelech or of men, and how Shlomo is now facing a challenge that he will overcome in revealing that prophecy. Okay? And he says something incredible. He says, we know throughout Shir HaShirim, Yerushalayim, the Ir, the city, okay, represent the heart, okay, of Shlomo HaMelech. And the center point, the focal point of a human, of an individual. And that's where all the kochot in a person gather to. And he explains, and he goes into technicalities. And I would like to go through it because it's so beautiful and so explanatory that it enhances the understanding of the Nefesh Adam. And he says the following. He gives first he says there's a mashal. In a city, you have squares, you have streets, you have busy streets, right? You have parameters. He says the same thing in a Nefesh Adam. The Nefesh man, a human being, is built in a way where also there are points of convergence of the kochot, of the different strengths and tendencies. You have specific areas for each tendency. You have and you have essence that are more powerful or more intense than others, right? In your midot, and depending on that, a person gets to know his city, gets to understand the focal point of his city, in order to be able to know where to put the proper efforts and empower himself or overcome certain challenges. So based on that mashal, on that comparison, so he says the same thing in a person. He says, in a man, on an intellectual level, you have ish chacham, you have the chacham, the wise, you have the knowledgeable, you have the wise, you have the one that has da'at, you have the one that can foresee and picture. When you talk about something, you can visualize from every level, right? You can visualize a formula, you can visualize a mathematical structure, you can visualize a deal, you can visualize it. And then you have the Misael, Ish Choshev Mahashavot, and you have the one that knows how to take an information and build from that information and take out more information from the information he's given. Ish Shomer, you have a man that knows how to hold on to the right information. Ish Zocher, somebody that has a very strong memory. He says, and these are the outcome or the realization of certain kochot, which is the chokhmah, the binah, the da'at, the mitzayer, the mehashev, the shomer, and the zocher. And then he says you have the man that sees, the man that hears, the man that smells, the man that touches, that tastes, that represents the five senses. And he says something very interesting. He says all these are influencing the intellect. Okay? The nefesh that sits in the brain, which is essentially the da'at, right? So a person has all these kochot at his service, but has to know that these kochot, if you don't master them or if you don't control them, will take over and influence your neshama. That's on a intellectual level. And then you have the more instinctive aspect of the nefesh. The person eats, the person grinds, the person digests, the person takes out, the person grows, the person separates minerals and vitamin and one before. Sorry. You have the person that is jealous, the person that has ego, the person that is cruel. You have the person that has no shame, the person that is anav, the person that has mercy, the person that is soft-hearted, the person that is baishan, that is shy, right? And this represents the different midot, right? And all those midot with the vegetative aspect of the nature of man all come from the more animalistic side of a human. And he says, so each one is a street. Each koach is a different street. But there is a place where they all gather. He says it's the imagination. The imagination is the power in humanity that will bring all those kochot, all those different little streets, all those different little essences and values and traits together to create something that can be real or not, right? That can be real or not. So he says, and man has the obligation to have the da'at, master that imagination, because if you don't control it, yeah. So you have a city. If you have a city or you have a kingdom and you don't have a king, it's chaos. It's chaos. An individual that doesn't have a king mastering his essence, giving a structure to his essence, he's chaotic. He can be every day can be something else. Every day he's going to do something else. Right? We've discussed this at length. So it says the Malbim, we are in a time in Shlomo HaMelech where you have all those kochot taking advantage of Shlomo. Okay, Shlomo is now busy building the Bet HaMikdash and he's very involved, etc., etc. And he allowed all these essences, all these strength, all those awakings in him, take the best of him. Take the best of him. Let's keep in mind. We're talking about Shlomo, King Solomon. We're talking Shlomo HaMelech. We're not talking about us. Yeah. So even when he takes the best of him, he's still Shlomo HaMelech. But he, if you will, this is what's taking over. This is what's taking over, and this is what he has to face in order to overcome all those kochot, all those different tendencies and instincts that were not mastered by, if you will, the influence of the prophetic influence of the neshama, right? And they're left to themselves for a specific purpose. At the time was to build out the Bet HaMikdash, and as we explained in the previous shiurim, to find the ability to combine spirituality and physicality at once in order to be able to infuse the proper attention to build the Bet HaMikdash. That's what the Malbim comes at. And based on that, now we enter the Pasuk Bet. Pasuk Bet is coming now to introduce the quest of Shlomo HaMelech, after we have explained from a Gaon perspective the void on every spiritual level of the buildup of human, and this chaotic like experience that Shlomo HaMelech is feeling on a physical level versus spiritual. Now we have in the magnitude of the leilot Shlomo HaMelech is referring to, right? The nights. Now we can introduce the quest and the journey of Shlomo HaMelech to overcome all this. It's very, very, very important to understand where Shlomo HaMelech was holding in order to understand and build the hope of every individual to overcome that darkness and bring the most amazing spiritual and light experience a man can have. So that is our first pasuk. Yes.
How long did it take him to construct it?
To build what?
A second Bet HaMikdash.
the period it took him to build the Beit HaMikdash, you mean?
Yes. How many years?
I'm sorry?
Years, I imagine.
Yes. I have to look for the exact moment. But we're talking about many years actually. But we're talking about now you're 11 years into the kingdom. Okay, 11 years into the kingdom. I have to check. I to give you the exact years of the build up. So based on all this, and this very dramatic, void. Pasuk Bet starts with Akumana. I stand up. Let me stand up.
Rav,
I'm sorry?
There's one thing I'm not understanding is that Shlomo HaMelech went to Hashem for his approval once it was built, right?
Yeah. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu did.
But didn't Hashem give him, didn't he give him permission to do so in the beginning?
Okay. If I tell you, you're in the real estate, right?
Yes.
Very good. So if I tell you to go and build me a house, okay, and you build me the house, does that mean I'm gonna for sure love it?
No. Gotta bring a Michael Carey, sure.
Huh?
Gotta ask Michael to give his stamp.
No, so Mata Omer.
I understand.
You Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan. Yeah? But Moshe didn't know if Hashem will accept it. And by the way, to build the Beit HaMikdash is not only a physical thing, right? It's the neshama that's in it. It's the kavanot that are in it. You understand? It's a lot that is involved. So you build it. It's one thing, but to know that it's accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a complete different thing. Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay. So, Akumana. Let me stand up. So, number one, Shlomo HaMelech is telling us that in order to break a period of darkness, if you want to fight the void and the heaviness of the void, Akumana, you have to stand up. If you don't, you're not proactive about it, and you don't do your effort to stop the darkness, to stop the void, well, it's not going to happen on its own. Akumana, I stand up, says Shlomo. Va'asoveva ba'ir, and I will go and around the city. Bashevakim, in the squares, ubarehovot, in the streets. Avakshait she'ahava nafshi, and I'm asking everyone, have you seen my beloved? Bikashti velo metzativ, and I'm asking everybody, and nobody has found it. Here, and that is an introduction to the second pasuk. We go from a moment of al mishkavi, of laying down, of being stationary, of being inactive, to asoveva ba'ir, to start going and checking and looking and being proactive. Says the Malbim, it's a point of it's a reaction that Shlomo HaMelech has, where he basically says it's enough. It's enough of letting the kochot, my instinct and my body and my imagination take over. It is time for me to take control over my spiritual life and to start looking for the light proactively. A person wants happiness. Happiness doesn't come by just a reaction of an event. Happiness is something you build, is something you developed, is something you look for proactively. And only by looking for the light will you push away the void of darkness. This is what Shlomo HaMelech is coming to establish. Okay? And by the way, I haven't found the ultimate love. I haven't found what I'm looking for. But the journey is already setting and paving the path for the success. It's not an instinct, reaction, or it's not something that you want it so it comes right away. No, it's a work that requires a lot of efforts, a lot of thoughts. You're going to look for it in many, many places, and you mostly might not find it in the beginning until one day it comes and it's and you actually find and connect. And once you connect to it, as we will see, it stays with you forever. It stays with you forever. So, akumana, once again, just stand up, proactivity. Va'asoveva ba'ir, ba'shevakim u'barchovot. Here, Shlomo HaMelech addresses three different places: the city, the squares, the streets. And we're going to have to understand what each one represents, okay? In order to learn what, from Shlomo HaMelech, how to approach the quest and the journey, the spiritual journey that we want to build, or the fight against the void of dark, the void that brings darkness to a person, and empower the journey of light and proactivity and positivity. The Gaon Vilna says, although in this pasuk there are only three point of reference of space that Shlomo HaMelech makes: city, squares, okay, square is like like the big squares, yeah, and streets. He says there's a fourth one also, which is outside of the city. When you have a city, that means that there is also a place outside of the city, right? That by definition, a city is a urbanization of and the gathering of people that build the city, right, from outside of the city. So the Gaon says we have another pasuk from Shlomo HaMelech that addresses also the exact same focus and message. The pasuk says, and I'm going to read it in Mishle. Okay, it's a pasuk in Mishle. I would like to open it so that we can go through it. All right, in Perek Aleph, if you want to see it, pasuk Kaf and Kaf Aleph, pasuk 20 and 21. The psukim say the following: Chochmot bachutz tarona. Outside, the chochmot, the wisdom, are sang. Saying, okay? Yeah. Tarona milashon rina. Okay. I sang. Okay. Barechovot, in the streets, titen kola. In the streets, it proclaims its voice. So you hear a melody of the chokhmah outside, but in the streets, you can hear its voice, its sound. So you go from a melody to the sound that is a little bit more acute. Okay? בראש הומיות, at the head of the busy streets, תקרא, בפתחי שערים, המראה התומר, okay, so in those busy streets, תקרא, she calls, so it's already a much more directed sound, right? When somebody calls you, so you can identify a message that brings you closer, right? Much more than a sound or a melody, a very far sound or a melody. בעיר המראה התומר, in the city, she speaks out. Okay? So we have 4 levels. We have outside, we have the squares, right? So outside, you hear the melody, the loud melody. Okay, that's outside. In the squares, you hear its voice. In the busy streets, you hear it call you. In the city, she speaks out. Okay? Good? Says the Gaon Mivilna something spectacular, but really spectacular. Okay? He says, Shlomo HaMelech is referring to the 4 levels of Chokhmah of the Torah Kedusha. Okay? He says, we have what is called Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. He says the Pshat, when you learn Pshat, Pshat is what is written. What does it mean? Simple understanding. Says the Gaon Mivilna ze bachutz. It's outside. He says the Remez, he says, Chutz la'ir merachok, you're far from the city. That's the Pshat. When you tell me what's written, I want to understand what's written there. So you're still far from the city. And then you get close to the city, okay? Then you have the squares where people gather, right? Where you see the city, but you're still not inside. He says that's the remez. It's what you learn from the Torah, what you take, the knowledge you take out from it, the halachot you can learn from it. That's the remez. And then you have the drash. The drash is when you are at the gates, right? At the gates of the city. That's already all the real, you know, all the halachot and the drashot and the lessons that you learn, yeah, from the Torah Kedusha on a more specific way, and when you dive much, you know, deep in the Torah. But you're still bachutz, you're in the Sha'arim, you're in the gates. And finally, Sodot HaTorah. Sodot HaTorah, he says that's when you're inside the city. The secrets of the Torah. And he says, HaKavanah HaAtzmit. This is when you understand the true purpose and the true reasoning behind the essence of what you learn. So if you want to learn, to understand the real kavanah of the reasoning behind, of the essence of the Torah, it's through the sod. Through the sod of the Torah, so the sodot HaTorah. So he says, and that's the different levels of call. When you're far, you hear the sound, but you hear the sound, but you don't understand what it is. That's when you're far. This is the pshat. Then after that, you have the remez. When you get closer, you can hear, but you cannot identify that there's something beautiful happening, but you cannot specifically understand what it is. And then you have the type, then you have what you hear. You hear the message, but it's a message to someone else, but it's a message. Yeah, you hear what's being told, And then when you're inside the city, when you learn the Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu is talking to you. He's talking specifically to you. It says Shlomo HaMelech, says the Gaon Mivilna, he says this is what Shlomo HaMelech is saying. Asoveva Ba'ir, I went and I looked ways to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Through the Pshat, through the Remez, through the Drash. And I cannot find. Right? That's why he's using only 3. Ba'ir, Ba'shevakim, U'Barchovot. He said, but I'm looking for ways to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to my neshama, without success. And now comes the approach of the Malbim Bli Neder. We're going to stop here, where the Malbim puts all this together and basically shows where was the flaw in the efforts of Shlomo HaMelech all this time to try to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and really, not when I say to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a prophetic level, right? And how does that, is explained in parallel and has a parallel to what the Gaon says. And we will see that sometimes when you want to build a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it has to happen through the alignment of the pardes, and not just the choice of one over the other because it's comfortable. We'll talk about next time. It's very, very technical. When eventually it's gonna get smoother, but right now it's still very technical. Any questions?
Is that part of what we were learning in Kohelet, which is his spiritual pursuits to connect to Hashem?
What do you mean?
Didn't we learn that Shlomo, pushed the limits of certain physicality in order to connect to Hashem and see the relation?
Yes. So it could very, very well be that this is the period of the darkness that we're talking about. Okay. So Be'ezrat Hashem, Bli Neder, the next shiur will summarize the 2 pesukim, and so in order to set the tone for pasuk Gimel, Be'ezrat Hashem.
Beautiful.
Shalom, shalom.
Wow.
Good to be back.
Andy, good to see you and the family.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.